Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining this webinar today with us. I'm very excited to be launching this webinar together with the Journal of Trial and Error and the Young European Catalysis Network and the TU Delft. I will give you a very short introduction. I'm Alessandra Toro, Community Manager of Material Pioneers. And today we're going to talk about embracing science as it is beyond Nobel-like research. Our speakers are gonna have the floor in a few seconds. And in the meantime, I'll just guide you through the program. We will start talking about, with Martijn, we will start talking about, rethinking big discovery in science. Then we will go through efficiency and effectiveness of field science together with Stefan. And afterwards, Yasemin will guide us through some open science practices. And finally, Pedro will explain us more about the scientist perspective. So which actions can you actually take to make science more effective? We just have two ground rules here. So each speaker has 10 minutes to discuss the topic. And you can write all your questions in the Q&A part, in the right side of your desktop, where you can write down the questions, and then we will collect the questions and we will answer all of them together at the end of all the interventions. Thank you so much. And I'll quickly give the floor to Stefan.
I think Martijn is going first.
I will go first.
Oh, sorry, Martijn.
Yeah. Well, welcome you all. It's fantastic to see many material scientists gather in a webinar on such a wild topic. As I have the honor to start, I thought it would be nice to dedicate my talk to explaining the title, Beyond Nobel-like Research. I see it as my job to explain what Nobel-like research is, and especially why it is problematic. And to warm you all up, I would like to use a classic meme that explains what a scientist is. It's quite self-explanatory, I think. Your friends think you are some sort of Harry Potter. Your parents always remind you of how you like to play with the home chemistry play box, and your family generally considers you as weird, crazy, mad, or whatever. However, I would like to highlight the bottom half of the meme, as in fact, it explains quite elegantly what it is that I want to emphasize today. Namely, this bottom half suggests the wide gap between what scientists think they do and what they actually do. And this is funny because it is true. Instead of just laughing about it, I argue that we have to take this difference very seriously. I want to point out today that this characteristical gap indeed exists within the scientific community, thus that scientists indeed have a wrong self-image. But most important, that the self-image is harmful. And today, we want to encourage you to change the middle picture of the bottom half. It is this picture, namely, that I will call today the powerful self-image of Nobel-like science or research. We know the Nobel Prize as the most prestigious award in science, but it is often nice to take a step back and ask ourselves, where does this prize actually come from? The award is namely named after Alfred Nobel, a 19th century engineer who got famous and very wealthy for inventing dynamite. At the end of his life, he decided to spend, that his fortune should be spent on a prestigious award to stimulate the progress of science and society. And as a historian of public health and late modern science, I could not resist looking up the actual will of Alfred Nobel, in which he outlined the purpose of his fortune and as he envisioned it in 1859. It states at the end, all of my remaining realizable assets are to be dispersed as follows. The capital converted to safe securities by my executors is to constitute a fund, the interest on which it to be distributed annually as prizes to those who during the preceding year have conferred the greatest benefit to humankind. When you hear this, there seems not that much wrong with Nobel-like research, as there is nothing wrong, I would think, with research that conferred the greatest benefit to humankind. I think that indeed it is a good idea to reward such research. What is problematic, I think, is the type of researcher we all have in mind when we think of someone who would win the Nobel Prize. The type of the brilliant scientist that has been the first to discover something valuable. Today, I want to argue that the expectations that this understanding of success implies might even prevent doing research leading to the greatest benefit of humankind. Imagine your favorite Nobel Prize winner and remember now how he or she has been able to show that he or she was worth this Nobel Prize. More concretely, imagine what you would have to do to adhere to this image. You cannot dispute that two things are essential. On the one hand, you have to be one of the first to discover something. And on the other hand, you have to publish this as last author in a high impact factor journal so that the world is aware of your discovery. This might sound a bit cynical, but it is important to realize that you will not be rewarded if you have independently discovered something for which others have been rewarded already. Moreover, if you have discovered something that could be to the great benefit of humankind, but nobody is aware of it, you will never be likely to be rewarded. My point is that the ideal of Nobel-like research is not only about the discovery or the science itself. Winning the Nobel Prize is the ultimate example of scientific success that practically means that you have to do whatever you can to be the first to publish something in a high impact factor journal like Science, Nature and Cell. And adhering to such an idealized self-image of big discovery Nobel-like research puts pressure on everything within the scientific community to produce results leading towards brilliant discoveries that change world problems. At this paper, one of my favorites, you see what we all want to achieve in participating in the red race of Nobel-like research. A paper in Cell, in this case, on a promising breakthrough by, in this case, Addison Wright and James Nunez, but most importantly, DPI Jennifer Doudna, who won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry last year for her contribution to CRISPR-Cas9 technology. Unfortunately, almost nobody wins a Nobel Prize. We can wonder ourselves, does this mean that nearly nobody is unsuccessful? Is successful, sorry. Well, let's go back to this meme. The Einsteinian professor in the middle of the lower half, now apparently interested in a cancer medicine, matches these CRISPR-Cas9 folks in that it perfectly fits the ideal scientific self of Nobel-like research. We have in mind an individual who has been the first to reach a breakthrough and published about it. But the practical reality of doing science, as you all know, and the meme indeed suggests, is much more severe. Because what you all do on a workaday basis is not necessarily as fancy and cool as we might want it to be. We think of ourselves as white-collared lab guys. Make fancy, rather ununderstandable images, discover the secrets of the brain, the structure of life, be our inner child, discover stuff, being fascinated. But come on, this is not how science works. Science is messy. It is a struggle. And it is a process of doing a hell of a lot of other things wrong before you arrive at meaningful results. I'm trying to provoke that there is a serious gap between the self-image of what a successful scientist ought to be and what every scientist does in practice. And this discrepancy between our idealized self-image and the realistic self-image is a big problem. After all, and this is the most important sentence of my talk, because of the way scientists value themselves and each other is based on an unrealistic self-image, scientists are currently valuing the wrong things. Let me give you a few slightly exaggerated examples. 1. Scientists have unrealistic expectations of themselves and for themselves. Not everyone who enters academia, as I just said, can be the highly respected discoverer that Nobel-like research implies. Not every PhD candidate will be able to have a sustainable career and will eventually become a professor. Does this say that these PhD students are not at all contributing to scientific breakthroughs? Is it the case that those who cannot make it within science are unsuccessful only because they have not been the first who published a breakthrough paper in a high impact factor journal? I'm quite unsure, to be honest. Well, the second claim, we promise, scientists, I would claim, provocatively, scientists fool themselves and society by making promises they cannot meet. We promise funders, taxpayers, and the industry that their money will lead to the applied knowledge that in turn results in solutions for today's world problems. But really, aren't we oversimplifying what it means to do research and the challenges of turning scientific results into solutions for actually existing problems? We all know that the ways in which innovation is often portrayed highly contrasts how innovation works, again, in practice. Spending money on research does not necessarily lead to a new medicine or a new mobile phone, as you all know. Is this PR, this science communication, ethical? What are the long-term consequences of for trust in science as a democratic institution if academics are making exaggerated claims and overpromise what they can deliver? If you are working on an obscure project on, let's say, solar panels, and claim at the end of a paper, as most of you all and I guess what I've seen do, or in your funding applications, that your research will eventually solve the climate crisis, to which extent is this a genuine promise? Are we really meaning this? So the third consequence is, I would say, with our focus on individual discoverers, we fail to understand that a scientific breakthrough is based on the cumulus of research done by the scientific community as a whole. Stefan will show you in the next talk that the suppressive self-image of big discovery science results in a wrong understanding and appreciation of the process of arriving at breakthroughs. The idealized version of science that scientists teach their students and also the public, in which a brilliant individual has an idea that results in a hypothesis, which is directly tested, which leads to falsifiable conclusions, into knowledge, into a breakthrough, and maybe into a Nobel Prize. It's like Big Bang Theory, overlooks that doing science is actually quite messy, and that only the accumulation of individual messiness, so to say, enables someone to put the ice on the cake. And to fully appreciate this, we have to rethink scientific success. Individual mistakes are crucial in arriving at meaningful discoveries that bring this greatest benefit to humankind. However, our focus on individual success makes us look away from the fact that every scientist needs to make mistakes first. As Stefan will explain further, underappreciating these individual mistakes have severe consequences for breakthroughs and success on the collective level. There is nothing wrong with celebrating scientific success. That's not the point of this webinar, neither of my talk. Our point is that Nobel-like research presumes that scientific success is the merit of a brilliant individual, with the risk that not being able to adhere to the expectations of this unrealistic self-image makes us underappreciate how individual failure, or better, unexpected results, contributes to collective success. In science, failure only exists at the individual level. But if we move beyond Nobel-like research as we value it today, I'm confident that we will start appreciating that it is quintessential building block in arriving at discoveries that are indeed to the greatest benefit of humankind. And that's just as Nobel himself had intended it to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Martijn. Very inspiring as always. Thank you so much. I will now give the floor to Stefan to continue this conversation. You can share your presentation.
Yeah. Can you see it? All right. Thank you. So as Martijn already indicated, I'll be talking on the individual and institutional consequences of the positive publication bias. So positive publication bias is the tendency of the academic system as a whole to mostly publish positive results. So to start off, I want to give an example of Anna the chemist. And I've chosen a nice stock image photo to represent chemistry. Anna is doing a synthesis. She's trying to make a new catalyst. So she tries to make a material that makes chemical reactions go faster or more efficient. And she's been working on this new method for months now. And one night at the lab, she finishes the last synthesis and she analyzes her new catalysis and she figures out that it doesn't work. And so of course, she's very disappointed because she has, for example, she's doing her PhD, so she has to publish quite a lot to get her PhD results. And negative results, as she knows, almost never get published. So she doesn't take the time to write up her results because she thinks it's better for me to try and develop something new that does work and try to get that published. And at the same time, in a lab far away, another person thinks, maybe I can try this new catalysis. And this person looks online whether somebody tried to make this catalysis. And they find no written record of all the things that Anna has done, because Anna didn't choose to write up her results because she was afraid they wouldn't get published anyway. So this new person starts the whole process all over again. And in a couple of months, we'll find out that his process to make a new catalysis doesn't work. And again, this person will probably not publish about it. And so this vicious cycle continues where people try what they think is a new method, which is actually not a new method because other people have tried it, and then fail at it, not publish about it, and not give other people the opportunity to figure out that this has already been tried and to prevent themselves from making the same mistakes. So preventing them from saving precious man hours, from saving money, or trying a subtly different approach to the same problem and maybe being successful, but at least not trying the exact same thing over and over again. So in a way, publishing negative results has a lot to do with the efficiency and effectiveness of the scientific process, both on an individual level and on an institutional level. So as I already said, on an individual level, it can often feel as a waste of time. So with the Journal of Trial and Error, we often go to conferences. And at some conferences, we hear people who find out at a conference that whatever they've been trying and failing at has already been tried. And some people in the field know that. It's sort of well-kept secret, but it hasn't been published about. So new people, for example, early career PhDs who haven't been to a lot of conferences yet, they don't know this well-kept secret. And then they find out later that this method that they've been pouring so much energy and time in has already been tried, didn't work. And yeah, it feels like a waste of time. Like, why was I doing this if it wasn't necessary to find out that it doesn't work because we already knew this? And this, of course, can be very demotivating. So in some fields, over 25% of PhD students leave their doctorate program before they get their PhD. And now I'm not saying that publishing negative results will suddenly improve the pressure that PhDs feel during their doctorate program. So of course, solving this particular problem won't necessarily drive these numbers down. But it's an overall problem. The way we see science, the way we handle science, the positive publication bias, but also the pressure to keep publishing, and those two are, of course, connected, that can put a lot of pressure on young PhD students, which leads to a demotivating and so a lot of them leaving the field. So on an institutional level, we again see the same problem. So a lot of money and people is put into investigating something that should already be known, but isn't known because it isn't published. And we already saw why that's problematic for example, the people, so the PhD students, but also the postdocs, professors who are doing this kind of research, but also the money. So scientific research is funded through different ways. So often it's funded by taxpayer money. And as Martijn already says, we shouldn't expect all scientific research to necessarily lead to a product that society can use. So not all science is applied science. I can't say if I fund this, then I want this medicine to come out at the end. But I do think we have an ethical obligation to the taxpayers to at least be honest about what we are producing, for they are indirectly paying for what we are doing. And thus, it should only be fair that they are able to see what we are researching. And this is, of course, partly open access, being able to read whatever we publish, but also tackling this positive publication bias, because even if all current scientific articles were open access, then there's still a lot of knowledge that we've gained in the labs, in the field, etc., that isn't even being talked about. So that's still not reaching those who are paying for it. For example, the taxpayer, but it can also be a good cause that is funding a particular type of scientific research. Scientific research is always funded by someone, and shouldn't we then be honest about our results to the people who are funding us? And secondly, it's very important for the growth of scientific knowledge that we are open about failure. Because science is not only about knowing what works, but also knowing about what doesn't work. That's also a form of scientific knowledge. Knowing that CRISPR-Cas, for example, doesn't work in some types of plants is a form of knowledge. And especially in the fields that use the null hypothesis significance testing statistical method, we should expect about 1 in 20 types of research to fail, because that's what we should expect given the statistical framework that we are using. Yet somehow we don't publish about those. And this may all seem a bit far, which we say in Dutch, far from a bed show, so it doesn't necessarily concern you, right? Well, I think that in the end, this positive publication bias negatively affects everyone. Because even though not all scientific research translates into direct products like medicine or policy changes, some scientific research does. And there we see the negative results of positive publication bias most clearly. So I want to talk quickly about the concept of meta-analysis. So a meta-analysis is a type of statistical analysis that compares a lot of research on the same topic. And to explain this, I often use the example of medicine, but you can also use the example of two materials that you're trying to compare. So no single research, no single study will be able to tell you which medicine or which material is more effective. You have to do a lot of studies and compare over those studies. And this is what Martijn talked about when he said that we need individual mistakes to, at the institutional level, be able to make claims. So each study is done by an individual scientist or group of scientists. But what we are after, the truth, if you will, if you're doing a meta-analysis over all these studies, at the institutional level, you're comparing the research of all these scientists combined, also the mistakes, also the failed results, etc. And only through this meta-analysis can you get a good picture of what actually works. So again, taking the example of medicine, if you have medicine A and medicine B, and medicine A works in around 50% of the cases in the lab actually, but we only publish the cases where it works, then it looks in the meta-analysis as if it works 100% of the time, because in 100% of the published studies, we saw that it worked. even though in reality it only worked 50% of the time. And so now you can quickly see that this positive publication bias can lead to less effective medicine, can lead to policy changes that are based on the published record, but are actually affecting change that won't work or will be counterproductive, because through all of the studies that we did, we saw that it didn't work or worked counterproductively, but we didn't publish about that. So as a philosopher, I'm used to just critiquing existing systems, but I thought it would also be nice to give a few concrete examples of how this could be changed. So first of all, there's of course a big, there should be an incentive for journals to publish negative results as well. They should be published in journals, they should be talked about at conferences, they should be talked about in interviews, so senior scientists should give the example, so they should talk in interviews about their failure, about why failure is important, and thus give more junior scientists the opportunity, but also the culture where they are able to talk about their failure. But all of that won't happen if we don't change the rewards and incentive structure that we have in academia. So we can tell junior scientists, you should publish your negative results, but if they fear for their postdoc position, if they do so, then we can ask them all we want, but they won't do so. We can tell professors that they should give an interview about the failure in their career, but if they don't get some type of reward for that, then they think, oh, I'm already working overtime every week. Why should I make time to give this interview on top of that as well? So all these solutions can only really come about if the reward and incentive structure in academia is changed, so that at every step of the way we acknowledge and reward failure and openness about failure. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan. It's very nice to see like all these ideas taking shape and getting more and more concrete. And I think now I can give the floor to Yasemin.
I think you should be seeing my slides now. If not,
yes,
please give me a shout. Thank you. Hi everyone, it's great to be here actually, and thank you also Sandra for organizing this nice webinar. And I would like to thank also to all the contributors, all the speakers, and wow, very impressive speeches, Martijn and Stefan, and I'm also looking forward to the talk of Pedro. So I will be actually picking up on the points how Stefan ended the talk about rewarding and recognizing transparent and open science practices. My slides are available. Very briefly, first of all, who am I? So I did my PhD in molecular genetics at Erasmus University Medical Center in the Netherlands. And I have been through many of those situations, like a lot of experiments not working, repeating, not working, getting frustrated that with things are not transparent or open enough, and actually how much more efficient we can be if we are more collaboratively and openly working with each other, and so on, and also frustrated with the rewards and recognition system. So that's why I made a career switch, and since 2018 I work as a data steward at TU Delft. So if you're wondering what is a data steward and what do you do as a data steward at TU Delft, every faculty has one, and we are the first point of contact for any research data or open science related questions. And we are here to support, train, and inspire researchers about good practices in research data management, reproducible research, open science, research integrity. And it's very important. We work as consultants and supporters and not as police, so we don't chase compliance. I think we already heard quite a bit about this already, but yeah, this is how we can quite nicely describe the evolution of academia, right? It was first doing research and sharing your results with the world. Then, oh, you need to publish or you perish. And then, no, that's not enough. You need to publish in high-impact journals or perish. And actually, even if you frequently publish in high-impact journals, you still face that you might perish. And when we look at this comparison as well, then you see, yeah, it is not about understanding phenomena and sharing our outcomes, but it's about getting that nice positive results that fits into a nice narrative that would get accepted in a journal, high impact journal such as Nature. So when we also look at how is currently all the rewards and recognition systems are about, that they look at the final product, the publication, which is basically just a PDF that's being and preferably then it's being published in a high impact journal. But if you look at how research is, there's a lot more than that. That's just the final product, and there's research data, there are the tools, methodology, there's software, there's algorithms. So for it to be fair, then you need to evaluate all of this. You need to evaluate the whole research procedure. But now there are indeed some funders, increasing number of funders are now requiring data sharing. But from the researcher's point of view, you need to be incentivized to share your data, because if you're still evaluated based on that final product, which is just a PDF and not based on sharing your data, then why should you share your data in the first place? Why should you open up your research outputs? There are some positive developments, I have to say. So DORA, San Francisco Declaration on Research Assessments, came first from a meeting in San Francisco, as the name suggests, but then it got quite some support worldwide. And accordingly, it recommends not to use journal-based metrics such as journal impact factors as a measure of the quality of research articles, and to assess an individual researcher's contributions in hiring, promotion, or funding decisions. And also, for the purposes of research assessments, consider the value and impact of all research outputs. So not just that PDF, but like the datasets and software and other outputs. And also consider a broad range of impact measures, including qualitative indicators of research impact. So if we look at now DORA, it has been signed up to almost 19,000 times by either individuals or organizations over 143 countries. You can also sign DORA if you like. But of course, signing DORA is just one step. If you sign DORA and do nothing about it, then there's also no point in that. So I want to talk a little bit about what happened in the Netherlands. So in 2019, Dutch public knowledge institutions like the universities, as well as university academic hospitals and founders of research signed DORA, and then they published a position paper describing their goals for modernizing the current recognition and reward system. And if you take a close look, you see that they call for a system that enables diversification and utilization of different career paths in academia, that acknowledges the independence and individual qualities of individual academicians, but also that recognizes team science, emphasizes quality of work over quantitative results, encourages all aspects of open science, and encourages high-quality academic leadership. Okay, signing DORA is good, so coming with the position paper is good, but what is really happening in practice? Are there really practical steps that are currently being implemented? So this is an example from the Dutch Research Council, that's one of the main funders in the Netherlands. Accordingly, they removed all references to journal impact factors and the H-index in all call texts and application forms. They are actively informing referees and committee members about having signed DORA and the consequences of this for the assessment procedures, and they introduce a narrative CV format. So accordingly, they ask the applicants to provide a narrative profile and list 10 key outputs. So these outputs are not only scholarly articles, but also other outputs like datasets, software, patents, preprints, exhibitions, and so on. And there is special attention at the moment being paid to open science. So the candidates are asked to indicate which of these outputs are openly available. If you want to learn more about this, all these organizations that have signed drafted together the position paper are organizing an event actually this week. So you can sign up and take a look to learn more. And I've been talking about a case from the Netherlands, but there came this recent report put together by DORA, European University Association, and Spark Europe. And there are different case studies, including the one from the Netherlands. So if you would like to learn more what's happening in other institutions and in other countries, please take a look here. But maybe you're wondering, okay, you work at TU Delft, so what is TU Delft doing about all of this? So TU Delft has its own open science program, which is part of its strategic, the university's strategic plan. And this program defines as main projects the pillars of open science. And on top of that, there are cross-cutting themes. And one of these cross-cutting themes is the recognition and rewards in the open era. As a result, now a committee has been set up that is working on these fields and what can be done in promotion and hiring criteria at TU Delft with regards to recognition and rewards. And they will come up with recommendations and present it. So exciting. And I just want to say that as a researcher, there is a lot on your plate. You have to juggle so many balls, and therefore I also do definitely understand if it feels like, okay, we have to do this, and on top of that we also have to do open science. So I completely understand that it might feel a lot. That's why I also think it is important to provide the necessary technical infrastructure as well as the research support services to enable that and not expect researchers to do all of this on their own. I have to say at TU Delft we are in a lucky position because we already had technical infrastructure as well as research support services in place, and then the team of data stewards was formed so we can help with any research data and open science related questions. And since recently, as a part of the open science program, also we set up a digital competence center, and within this center we have data managers and research software engineers who can provide hands-on support for our researchers to implement research data management workflows and developing research software in their projects. And I also want to briefly mention that we also do have a bottom-up community effort, the Open Science Community Delft. We are part of the international network of open science communities, which started in the Netherlands. At the moment, every Dutch city with a university almost have one open science community, and it started in the Netherlands, but it went beyond. That's why it is now called the international network. They share a code of conduct and guiding principles, and anyone interested in any aspect of open science can join, not only researchers, and no one's expected to be an expert. None of us is an expert. We are all learners, so just being interested is enough. And what are the benefits? For TU Delft, informing the development of relevant policies and the TU Delft Open Science Program, network building, learning and practicing new skills, and getting increased impact, visibility, and recognition. About this one, I can really say that we see with our community members that they are becoming the go-to persons in their research groups, in their departments, in their faculties. For instance, whenever there's any policy or there's any action that's relevant to open science or research data management, they are being consulted, so they are getting more recognized being in these fields. And we also, in another effort to give more visibility for their efforts, our team member Connie Claire has interviewed many of our community members and has written up their stories, how has been their journey with open science. And these are all openly available. With this, I would like to end, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Yasemin. It gives you a lot of hope because we've heard so far like so many problems and like it sounds impossible to solve. But yeah, thanks to our data stewards and also a lot of people that work in the field, it looks like something we can achieve together. So I'm gonna ask Pedro to start sharing his screen. Thank you, Pedro. And afterwards, don't forget to post your questions. We already have a few, so we're probably going to take on a couple of the questions that are already published. Thank you so much.
So, thank you, Alle, for organizing all this. To start with, everyone, it's great to be here and talk to you. I think I don't have a very easy task now that Stefan, Martijn, and Yasemin already covered a lot, but I think I'll just take a different perspective on it. So I think I agree with Martijn that scientists we should more embrace science as it is, and so that starts from the picture we have from science. But even before that, from the notion of impact. So we have spent so much time in the last decades talking about impact, and in fact, the first important point is that we should talk about societal impact of science and not just a narrow definition of impact. So science aims at improving humankind, as also Martijn said, and so there's a way research solving a problem will trickle to society in that sense. So that's what is intended by societal impact. So it's not only about what our science does for the research community, but what it does also for society, for industry, and also for policy, which is often disregarded. And still, it might be that, as we were saying before, you are working on basic science that there's not something that will trickle immediately to society, but then it will still impact your research community. The point is that we take it broadly and always assess all the impacts science has on society. So science is about improving society and not only making a difference in research community. And then how science works. So Martijn was talking about the messy picture, which is indeed a true one. I want to take again a bit different perspective on that. So first thing that is important about science is usually very slow to come to a concrete application. For instance, even for basic research, it can be utterly slow. For the periodic table, it took more than 2 centuries to go from the discovery of each element to the table itself. So it's impossible to try to evaluate today what science or what the impact of your science will have in a few centuries, what will be the definite impact of the science you are doing today. In another perspective, science is very complex, not only about the way you produce your results in the lab, but also the way we interact with all the other people in the process of science. So there are interactions between different research groups. Then, if you are indeed in a more applied project, there are interactions with companies, even with spin-off companies these days. And then there might be end users or not, or you might be talking more about policy, and then we are talking about research institutes, for instance. So there's a number of actors, and the final product of science, being it a theory or an applied technology, comes from all these interactions, and it's then very complex. Now, our science is evaluated regardless of we want a global impact over society. It's evaluated based on a few very simplified metrics. So that's the age index, there's the impact factor, which more of everything, it evaluates the citations of a journal and not the quality of any individual work, even though people use it for that. And all that gave rise to the so-called metric tide, in which everyone tries to quantify what scientists are doing. And here, where I do agree with Martijn that scientists might think too high of themselves and might oversell what they are doing. We oversell what we are doing. It's also clear that we are asked to do that, and that comes also from the pressure of society, but mainly from politicians and bureaucrats, which want to evaluate, show results, and assess quality or excellence in some way. So that is what is so clearly wrong about the metrics we are using, is that we are taking a slow and complex process that should impact various aspects of our society into numbers. What is already changing? So Yasemin already went a bit through it. So there's DORA, which discards simplistic metrics and focus on content. There's also universities working on that. So there are universities indeed going pretty much against the current publication or evaluation system. In Europe, there's various examples, as Yasemin gave, but there's also LERU, the League of European Research Universities, in which they really want to account from direct and indirect interactions in research and assess quality and relevance of social impact, and impact always meant in this broad way. So it's also possible to evaluate science in a broad way. It doesn't mean that if we stop with metrics that we will stop evaluating science. That's not the purpose. The purpose is to evaluate science the right way. And then there's also the scientific societies that till now, like the Nobel Prizes, have been mainly focusing on individual prizes and awards, and now are embracing as well the fact that science is not made by this brilliant guy alone in his office or in his lab. So, for instance, the Royal Society of Chemistry is now promoting different types of awards to reflect the different types of contributions that exist to science, including, for instance, from technicians and teaching assistants. So this is already changing in academia. So as a scientist, what we can do is to support all this, share your thoughts about this, supporting your own institutions, people that you know are behind this type of initiatives. What can we change ourselves? First, to reward others in the right way. So a good policy is author contribution statements that you see more and more, in which is clear which author of a paper did. You should reward undergraduates, technicians, and that is all kind of important contributions. That also makes clear that science is not this linear process in which someone has an idea, goes to the lab, puts it in practice. Then promote comprehensive recognition. If you are part of a society and you want to make an award, make it about the process and not about this individual person. Evaluate also your own research comprehensively. Also, as Yasemin said, use the narrative type of CV instead of a CV that is just based on metrics. Explain the process and the interactions. Most likely here, you also have something more distinctive that you can show that you really did in a different way than just one more paper or one more point on a given impact factor. And just don't use metrics. It's clear our age index is wrong, our impact factor is wrong. Don't use it, period. Then there's open science. So open science does allow for us to share more what we are doing, and then being more open and honest about our research, which makes it more reproducible for others as well. So report always detailed procedures and share your data openly. That's also what Yasemin mentioned. I would like to mention that you can add in your paper a data availability statement. So just telling people where your data is, and then you can put it in an open database in a very easy way. You can use Zenodo, which is free, public, and will be there for a very long time. And you can also reference this data set in your paper. So just make sure you link it. So to take home, science is so much more than the narrow definition of scientific impact we have been listening for the last 30 years. We need to fix science. We need to make it more open, to be reproducible and slower. And then we cannot use simplistic metrics that were proved wrong. That's simply not scientific. And just make sure you share your data and code whenever you can. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pedro. So again, we see some hope. We have a couple of questions here. You guys can also see the Q&A, but I'm going to read them. So the first one is, what are the recommendations for communicating the negative research results across research community in a given field or topic? Someone wants to take on that one?
Yeah, so first, I think it's very important to have it in some written form. So as I already said, if you just communicate about negative results at conferences, it's already a beginning, but people who do not have the financial means to often go to conferences or are just beginning, for example, they still have a hard time finding these negative results. And then I think in the beginning, it would be good to have specific journals focusing on these negative results. For example, the Economic Journal of Negative Results. In the future, it would be great if these are no longer needed. So if it has been standardized enough that all journals publish as much negative as they do positive results. But we see now with, for example, PLOS ONE, they also say that they publish negative results, but it's still about 90% positive results, 10% negative results. Whereas a couple of studies have shown that we should expect about 60 to 70% positive results and the rest negative results. So there's still a bias, even in the journals that say they publish both. So I would, for now, for the time being, I would say that it would be nice to have journals that specifically focus on publishing these negative results for each field. And I think it's also good to reflect on what failure means. So not only publish the negative results, so the empirical study, but also have the author themselves or a theorist from the field or a philosopher really reflect on why do we consider this failure and what does this mean in the broader context.
Do you have an example, Stefan, of such a place?
Yeah, so for example, there's the Journal of Trial and Error that Martijn and I started, which is a multidisciplinary journal. But yeah, I think besides that, it would be nice to have these monodisciplinary journals with similar concepts as well.
I think we can. I think what you said is very fair in the scenario as it is. But I think I would not say to undergrads or to PhD students to do it. But I think we all have the responsibility of giving it a try in regular journals. I think people are more open to honest research of what it seems about. And especially when you publish your data, there's no reason to not publish your negative results, even if they don't take the main place in your publication. That should not still be the case, but now there's no reason that you don't share at least as data your negative results, and I think that's already a step forward.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for answering the question. And of course, we have the journal Trial and Error for publishing negative results. These guys already accomplished the first publication, I think a month ago or something. So it's up and running. So if you need to reach out to them, please do it. We have another question. Do you think that the pandemic and the vaccine development changed the perspective on the importance of collaboration in science? If yes, do you think these will have a visible impact on the way research is done? It's a very optimistic question. I'll let you answer. I don't know if someone is willing to take it on.
If I may, I can start. I mean, there is indeed a difference in how we do research. There's a lot of things that has changed actually with the COVID research. That's also the reason why we are able to have access to vaccines at the moment, because a lot of things were made open and there was a lot of collaborative work going on. One thing I think that's really impressive is preprints were already there, but it's really so many people started publishing their preprints around COVID. So then you can directly have access to the research, the results of that research while it's undergoing peer review. That really does help with the progression of science. Also, there's this database called GIS8, and there was a lot of data about coronavirus has been shared, and that really has been really useful. So I do think that people got more used to now sharing data and sharing preprints, so it will continue. I don't think it will continue full swing in terms of collaboration, but I hope that this was, we learned a lot of good lessons. I mean, also, apart from open science, with a lot of things we learned, I think all of us learned a lot of good lessons how to make things more sustainable. Look at just education. Now there's a lot of educational materials that are being opened up, for instance. So that's my hope, but maybe one of you want to comment more.
Well, I may want to add something. So I think it is a rhetorical question, because it has had a lot of influence, and there is indeed now a vaccine that cannot be understood in isolation from the enormous amount of preprints, and also funders and policymakers all basically deciding that this specific problem needs to be solved, and that the whole scientific community need to focus on that specific problem. So, and also I think scientists themselves are very much aware that nobody could solve such a problem on their own. So in that sense, a collaboration is not necessarily an ideal. I think it is also a pragmatic stance. But what I think, and what I hope, now let's say what I hope is that the scientific community itself also starts to understand that it is necessary to have a clear understanding of problems that are existing in society. So the big advantage of the pandemic now is that it is a very clear example, or a very clear problem. And what I also hope is that these specific problems that scientists start reflecting on these problems from more multidisciplinary perspectives, because of course on the one hand, the pandemic is a problem that arises from a specific virus, but also the fact that the solutions to this problem on a social level are also becoming part of the problem requires not only hardcore scientists like you are to help find a vaccine, but also to discuss with epidemiologists, for example, to implement preventive measures, and also for, I hope, humanities scholars to reflect on the meaning of such a pandemic. And that is what I would hope for the future, that this pandemic shows us not only that we have to be efficient, but also that we need to reflect on the specific problems we think we are solving as a scientific community. So that is what I will hope that the pandemic has or the kind of influence the pandemic has on the future, that it opens a space for more reflection on what scientists are doing in a context of more collaboration.
I think that's definitely possible, and I think scientists will be willing to take that step. But in academia, as is mostly now in the Western world, space means money. So let's see where the universities and the government will put the money on, right?
So we have another question, but this is going to be the last time we're going to take. For further information, please get in touch with us. We are, all 5 of us are very happy to have this chatter conversation with all of you. So you can find a lot of information on materialpioneers.com, mostly on a couple of fields we also mentioned today, such as open science. You can also find there some information Yasemin gently gave us and all their slides about open science. But please also visit the Journal of Trial and Error for all information about sharing mistakes, and the Yasemin Catalysis network for everything that is related to creating new materials and catalysis. So I'm going to take the last question, and this is one. There is hardly any knowledge about open science in the Middle East, and I wish to initiate an open science community in Saudi Arabia to draw people's attention to open science practical benefits. That's great. How would you advise me to start? Yeah, the microphone doesn't work. So I think, Yasemin, that's so new.
Yeah, I can comment a little bit on it, and if you have any other contributions, please step in. So I just wanted to say this open science communities in Netherlands started first in Netherlands, but it really became an international network. I don't know if I can reply directly in this and if everyone can see, but I guess you should be able to see my comments. So they did publish a starter kit. So if you want to start setting up your own open science community, I think that's a good starting place. And I also wanted to mention that there is this program called Open Life Science. I think their applications have just ended, but it happens once in every couple of months. And then you can apply to their cohorts, and each time then if your application is accepted, then you come up with a project, and then you're guided during the whole procedure. And although it says Open Life Sciences, it's also beyond life sciences, I have to say. And then you really get mentors who can help you to set up your project. I would really start with these two resources. And there's, of course, a lot more available online, but these are my first two to-go points. Maybe others have also points to add.
Well, if nobody has, I might have to add 2 points. On the one hand, and also try to answer the question. So on the one hand, I would recommend start bottom up. So not start to intervene on a policy level, because then it becomes just another sort of maybe in general the case for starting open science communities within academic contexts, but try to foster momentum from scientists themselves, and not necessarily from policymakers or politicians and so forth. That's another direction, but I think to start this is the best way. And on the other hand, I think the question itself is interesting because it shows us that open science is a very Western phenomena, and especially a phenomenon from the global North. The fact that it is necessary to open up science implies that it has been closed, and the fact that it has been closed, so to say, is, and to tie it to Pedro's earlier answer, is because in the global North science has become a business model. So the fact to do open access and to think of this as reinventing the business model of science still puts us in the frame of having it as a business model. And I can give a small example of, for example, in South America, where and also Southern Europe, that it is very normal to just publish your work completely for free, because of the fact that the research itself is funded by the state, funded by the collective. So I think in general it's more of a comment on this question, is that we cannot really think of implementing open science into the Middle East without really evaluating the different contexts, the different social contexts of implementing these ideals in other countries. So I think those are the two things that I would have liked to add.
Do some of you have some last comments before closing the session?
I'll maybe just take what Martijn said, and yeah, it's clear that in the Western world we still have some space or freedom in academia to get together and do bottom-up initiatives. So let's just take it and do it. I think that's the final message.
So I will say the title was a little bit like pessimistic, and the outcome of the discussion we had is very optimistic, and I really enjoy that. Thank you so much for being here with us today, and this is just the first of many other collaborations you will see between us. And thank you so much, really, all of you, Yasemin, Pedro, Stefan, and Martijn. And I'm very proud that I'm part in this collaboration with you with Material Pioneers, and I'm hopeful for the future of research. Thank you so much, and good evening to everybody.